Good afternoon. My name is Peter Fahm, and I'm the director of the Africa Center here at the Atlantic Council. On behalf of the Atlantic Council's chairman, Governor John Huntsman, and its president, Fred Kemp, as well as our partners in this event from Thomson Reuters, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you, those here present at the Council in Washington, and those joining us around the globe, especially in Africa, through the webcast of this event, to this conversation with Her Excellency Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Coordinating Minister for the Economy and Minister of Finance of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Among those present this afternoon, I want to acknowledge several distinguished guests who honor us with their presence. His Excellency Professor Adebowale Adefuye, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to the United States and a member of the Atlantic Council. Ambassadors Herman Cohen and Jendai Frazier, former Assistant Secretaries of State for African Affairs, Ambassador Howard Jeter, former United States Ambassador to Nigeria. Today's event is a partnership between the Atlantic Council's Africa Center and Thomson Reuters. Before turning it over to Brian Pecorelli, President of Tax and Accounting at Thomson Reuters, permit me to say a word about the Atlantic Council's Africa Center. The Africa Center was established in September 2009 with a mission to help transform U.S. and European policy approaches to Africa by emphasizing the building of strong geopolitical partnerships with African states and strengthening economic growth and prosperity on the continent. The Center seeks to engage and inform both policymakers and the general public of the strategic importance of Africa, both globally and for American and European interests in particular, through programs, publications, as well as a robust media presence. Within the context of the Atlantic Council's work to promote constructive U.S. leadership and engagement in international affairs, based on the central role of the Atlantic community in meeting international challenges, the Center supports and collaborates with the public and private sectors in forging practical solutions to the challenges and opportunities in Africa. It's in the spirit of this mandate that I'm pleased that we're able to host this particular discussion. Just 2 months ago, during the historic U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, the largest event any U.S. president has held with African heads of state or government, we had the privilege of organizing 11 high-level side events with presidents, cabinet ministers, business leaders, and representatives of civil society as we celebrated the strengthening of ties between the United States and one of the world's most dynamic and fastest-growing regions. As I've argued repeatedly, if the story of Africa is increasingly one of buoyant economic prospects, it's a dynamism driven in large part by political reform and improvements in governance and transparency. And when we were brainstorming with our friends at Thomson Reuters about a series highlighting thought leaders who exemplified the new Africa, we could think of no one better than Her Excellency, Minister Ngozi, to kick off the series. The vision she has for sustained prosperity, building stronger institutions, supporting civil society, furthering and diversifying economic growth in Nigeria is precisely the sort of innovative approach to sustainable development and enhanced governance that we wanted to highlight. So we're deeply honored that she accepted our invitation, although we realize she has set a very high bar for us going forward. Before formally introducing the Minister for her remarks, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Brian Pecorelli, President of Tax and Accounting at Thomson Reuters. Brian is a CPA and an attorney, a dangerous combination, as I can personally attest, being married to a forensic accountant who does litigation. Brian joined Thomson Reuters in 1984 as a product accountant and has since held a variety of roles in client development, corporate services, and compliance. Brian.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'm thrilled to also welcome you to today's event featuring the Honorable Minister of Finance for Nigeria, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. It's a great honor for us to partner with the Atlantic Council to host the Honorable Minister. For decades, she has been an outspoken advocate for innovation and public and private partnerships that are essential in sustaining, developing, and promoting good governance. In her current capacity as Minister of Finance, and also while serving as the Managing Director for the World Bank, she has actively promoted trade and investment to complement international assistance. I fully agree with the Honorable Minister that Africa is primed to sustain economic growth by stimulating trade and attracting investment. Thomson Reuters partnerships in Nigeria and across Africa has supported this approach. Since 2010, the tax and accounting business of Thomson Reuters has worked with state governments in Nigeria to modernize land registry and mapping systems. Cross River State, Thomson Reuters, and TechBridge, a private Nigerian technology firm that we partner with, undertook the 3-year land registry modernization effort. The system went live in 2013, and the results have been impressive to date. Registering a certificate of occupancy in Cross River once took months or even years. It can now be completed in a week. Citizens now conduct land transactions on a web portal or at a newly opened customer service center. All land transactions are transparent and are publicly searchable. By the summer of 2013, 6 months since the new system was implemented, more than 12,000 records were digitized, and more search and registry fees were collected in just 2 months than in the entire 4 years before the onset of the Cross River reforms. This progress represents the essence of Minister Okonjo-Iweala's belief that trade and cooperation, reinforced with technological know-how, can help sustain growth. In Cross River, we have worked alongside the government to implement sophisticated technology, but we have also invested in training our partner firm, TechBridge, so that they can better support the government staff now and in the future. We continue to transfer knowledge to TechBridge, training their people in our global development centers. And we are now working in Nigeria's Plateau State to modernize the land registry office there. Land reform initiatives in Nigeria will pay big dividends for many years to come, and for the government and for the people. This is especially important as Nigeria looks to stimulate its housing market and to provide more inclusive growth for more people across all of Nigeria. Thank you for being here for what promises to be a thought-provoking conversation. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Pham.
Thank you, Brian. Following remarks by Her Excellency Leslie Roughton, Thomson Reuters News' Senior State Department correspondent, will moderate a discussion with the minister. We're delighted that Leslie, who regularly travels with the Secretary of State, is in town and able to do the honors. During her 20 years with Thomson Reuters, Leslie has served as a correspondent in Africa, Europe, Canada, covering both politics and the economy. Previously, she covered international economic and development diplomacy with a focus on international institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, and thus got to know the minister quite well. Before joining Thomson Reuters, Leslie worked for several newspaper publications in her native South Africa. And now it's my privilege to introduce our guest of honor. Her Excellency Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is currently the Coordinating Minister for Economy and Minister of Finance of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and thus responsible for managing the finances of the largest economy in Africa and the 8th most populous country in the world. She's renowned as the first female and black candidate to contest the presidency of the World Bank Group, backed by Africa and major developing countries such as Brazil, in the first truly contested race for the world's highest development finance post. Previously, from 2007 to 2011, she was managing director of the World Bank, the #2 position, where she had oversight responsibility for the World Bank's $81 billion operational portfolio in Africa, South Asia, Europe, and Central Asia. Dr. Okonjo-Iweala spearheaded several World Bank initiatives to assist low-income countries during the 2008-2009 food crisis and later during the global financial crisis. In 2010, she was chair of the World Bank's successful drive to raise almost $50 billion in grants and low-interest credit for the poorest countries in the world. Before that, she was Nigeria's finance minister for 3 years, as well as briefly Minister of Foreign Affairs. As Minister of Finance, she spearheaded the negotiations with the Paris Club of Creditors that led to wiping out of $30 billion of Nigeria's debt, including the outright cancellation of 60% of Nigeria's external debt. Before her service as Minister of Finance began in 2003. She had a 21-year career at the World Bank as a development economist, rising to the position of Vice President and Corporate Secretary in 2002. Dr. Okonjo-Iweala was educated at Harvard University and has a PhD in regional economics and development from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. She's the recipient of numerous awards and honors. I'll just mention one recognition. Forbes magazine ranked her as one of the 3 most powerful women in Africa. If you know anything about Africa, it is the truth that it's the women of Africa who make things happen. So that really is saying something. I might add that the 2 other women identified by Forbes, Liberia's Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and Malawi's Joyce Banda, are not only personal friends. See Banda's video for the 2013 Atlantic Council Distinguished Leadership Awards Gala, but also the leaders of their respective countries. So who knows? So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Her Excellency Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for that warm introduction, but I just want to disabuse any of the who knows. Lest the press that is in here start asking me questions, and we know. I'll just be focusing on this job. So distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm really delighted to be here. I'm bringing you greetings from Nigeria, and particularly from my president, President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. I have so many of the distinguished people in the audience. From Nigeria, we have our ambassador who has been recognized, the former governor of Cross River State. I'm sure it's under Governor Donald Duke that a lot of the reforms were started. But we have so many distinguished people. I want to thank you all for coming and good friends. I want to thank the Atlantic Council and Dr. Peter Pham for taking such an interest, and Thomson Reuters, led by Frederick Kempe. I really want to thank you, and Leslie, above all, it's wonderful to see you here and to see you in this role. Hopefully you're not going to quiz me too much. She's one of the best correspondents ever. Thank you. So thank you. I've been invited to speak on the vision for sustained prosperity in Nigeria. And I'm honored to be the first speaker in this series on Africa. And I know it's going to be a great series. Thank you for doing it, because you might think there's a lot going on Africa, but I want to tell you that there are not enough fora where Africans can really come and speak for themselves, as opposed to having people interpret for them what it is the continent is about. So it's a great opportunity for us to talk about Africa, to talk about Nigeria. I just want you to know that an exciting transformation is taking part on the continent of Africa. I want to start off with that. In the decades of the 80s and 90s, we saw an Africa that was heavily indebted, with an average debt to GDP ratio of 75%. An Africa plagued with slow economic growth of about 2% annually. An Africa with hyperinflation, with inflation rates as high as 48% per annum. And an Africa with a great deal of poverty. An Africa troubled by civil wars and political strife. An Africa in desperate need of donor aid and assistance. This is the picture. This is what was happening in the 80s and 90s when the continent was written off as more or less lost. Fast forward 2 decades, and the story is remarkably different. It's not that we don't have a heap of problems, and I'm sure I'll get to them, but we now see an Africa whose economy is growing faster than most economies in the world, with better than 5% growth in GDP, and containing 6 of the 10 fastest growing countries in the world. We see an Africa with low debt, averaging about 32% of GDP, which is certainly much lower than that of many developed countries around us. I don't want to quote numbers. We see an Africa with low inflation at a single digit on average, with a middle class that has nearly tripled in size from 126 million people in 1980 to nearly 350 million people now, about a third of the population by 2010, according to the African Development Bank. We see an Africa obviously enjoying a peace dividend with better governance and democracy than we had before. And we see an Africa that is now being courted by foreign investors, with FDI increasing from about 9 billion in 2000 to 50 billion by 2012. You will agree with me that Africa has come a long way and that it's gone from being a lost cause to almost a hot prospect. Now, I want to lay this out, not because I'm being Pollyannish, and I don't know that there are problems, but I just wanted you to not to forget the journey that this continent has traveled in so little time. Now, you may think, well, all this is well and good, but there are tremendous problems, and I'm going to use my country to talk at length about the problems, to illustrate the problems, so you won't think I'm running away from them. You might think what I'm saying is strange. In an era when everyone is talking about the Ebola crisis and about the flashpoints of insurgency, like the Boko Haram in Nigeria and the El Shabaab in Kenya, you might think it sounds strange when we still have conflict in Central African Republic and South Sudan. Yes, these are certainly challenges. The Ebola crisis in particular could be devastating if not decisively dealt with as a global challenge. It is certainly a frightening specter that we have in front of us. And with the three countries of Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia suffering not only the humanitarian crisis that we see, but also a beginning economic crisis, with the IMF estimating that about 3.5 percentage points of growth could be shaved off the growth of Liberia and Sierra Leone, and about 1 percentage point of Guinea. This is something that we certainly need to think about. The fact that Ebola crosses borders is what is frightening, and that it could devastate the other countries surrounding. But we also need to step back and see that two countries have been able to contain this crisis. Senegal and Nigeria have successfully been able to do with this, touch wood, and to contain it. And that if we focus on this problem, not as a Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone, or West Africa, Africa, but as a global problem, as something that could bring negative externalities to the rest of the world, we will be able to deal with this crisis. We will be able to stop it. And I think it is incumbent on the world to recognize this, not to be frightened and turn it into a specter that people are so afraid of, but into an opportunity, not only in the short term to save lives, but actually in the long term to strengthen the health systems of all of these fragile countries that have fought so long to overcome conflict. I think that in spite of the situation we have on Ebola, that this is not a permanent thing that will stay with the continent, that we will be able, as a globe, we have to be able to contain this, and that Africa will continue to move on in the direction. Yes, we have one step forward, a couple of steps sideways, but the trend is surely forward to a better performing Africa. Now, Nigeria is a classic example of these two tales of Africa that we see. The tale of an Africa that is doing well, but still an Africa that has challenges. Nigeria is part of this phenomenon. And if you read this recent McKinsey study, you'll find the Nigeria of successful stories, but also the Nigeria of challenges. The return to democratic rule at the turn of the millennium in the country has brought better macroeconomic management and a series of reforms starting under the government of President Olusegun Obasanjo that unleashed economic growth. And for the past decade, the country has been growing at an average of 7% per annum, driven by the strong growth in the non-oil sector, not in the oil sector, but the non-oil, particularly telecommunications, manufacturing, construction, wholesale and retail, and the creative industries, to name a few. It is time that we started thinking of Nigeria, not just as an oil economy, an oil and gas economy, but also as a very diverse economy with some robust non-oil sectors. The recent GDP rebasing exercise revealed that Nigeria is now the largest economy on the continent and the 26th largest in the world, with a GDP of $510 billion. And as I said, perhaps one of the most diverse economies on the continent. Only 15% of GDP is from natural resources, mainly oil and gas, while the services sector accounts for 51% of GDP, agriculture for 22%, telecoms almost 9%, manufacturing 7%, and Nollywood, our film industry, which did not even exist before, contributing 1.2% of GDP. Nigeria is also, of course, Africa's largest population, with about 170 million people, or nearly 20% of the continent's population, and it's also its largest market. The survey by McKinsey Global Institute that I refer to reveals that almost 40 million Nigerians are what can be said to be in the consuming class, with incomes that exceed $7,000 per year. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Nigeria is certainly an economic powerhouse and deserves to be a member of clubs of its peers like the G20. But more often than not, Nigeria is not well understood. It is often characterized in different ways. It's underrated, and I'll speak to these points. Oftentimes, Nigeria does not receive recognition for the good things that it has done, but is left battling with a kind of image for the bad things or the not so good things that are happening in the country. Of course, we take responsibility. We cannot expect anyone to do our homework for us and give us a good image. We have to take it on ourselves to be able to manage that. But I hope that in the months and years to come, we'll be able to demonstrate the two sides of Nigeria. Yes, we will not run away from our problems. We will outline them, but yes, we'll also speak boldly of the successes we've had. And one such success, thank you everybody for recognizing this, is what has happened with Ebola, the fight against Ebola, the way that the country mobilized. The president declared an emergency and rallied everybody around, including making sure that all the right equipment was brought in on time, be it temperature thermometers, which we ordered thousands of, protective gear, isolation units, millions of units of hand sanitizers, whatever was needed in order to fight this. And Lagos State that mobilized very quickly to also help to get this done. The cooperation, unprecedented, the rallying round of all Nigerians around a common cause, and the cooperation between state and federal level in Lagos State and in Rivers State led to an unprecedented move that gave us our success and showed that indeed, if you act, you're able to save lives and to have a considerable impact on this disease. We want to just use that to illustrate that this country is capable, has been capable, and will continue to be capable to solve problems one by one. We've also not left assisting the other countries. We've given a grant, probably the first country to do so, a grant of $3.5 million to the 3 countries, was given by our president, I think 2 months before anyone thought of assisting. We were also training the citizens from these countries in our centers for disease control. But we did it quietly. We are not so good at blowing our own trumpet when the time comes. But I think we need to open up now. We stand ready to do more. We are at one with our sister countries who are undergoing this. So I just wanted to illustrate that. Now, you know, here is a Nigeria that has laid the basis, the sound economic basis on which to move forward. And I want to tell you that in spite of the challenges which I'll come to in a minute, the country's future and prospects are bright. The key economic indicators are sound. We are still expecting our economy to grow by 6.5% this year. It grew by 6.54% in the second quarter. Actually, the IMF is estimating about 7% for us. Our fiscal deficit is low, expected at 1.03% of GDP in 2014. I'm sure it's one of the lowest in the world. Inflation is in single digits, even though it's slightly ticking up. Reserves are relatively strong at $39 billion, including $4 billion of savings in what we call our excess crude account, our fiscal buffer account, and $1.55 billion in our sovereign wealth fund. Our pension fund, our new defined benefits fund, has over the past decade has about $27 billion in savings, which we are using instruments to mobilize into investment, into infrastructure in the country. Our stock market has been one of the better performers on the continent, even though profit taken by investors this year has slowed the market down. The study by the McKinsey Global Institute, in which we had no hand, by the way, shows that Nigeria has the potential to expand its economy by 7.1% per annum through 2030, raising its GDP to more than $1.6 trillion, and thus bringing the country to a top 20 economy with the potential to lift 70 million of its people out of poverty. But as Dr. Peter Pham wrote in the fall 2014 issue of the Ambassador's Review, though the story of Africa is increasingly one of economic dynamism, there are very real security, humanitarian, and developmental challenges which remain to be confronted. And I want to agree with that. So before you declare me too much of an optimist, let me share with you the numerous challenges which confront the country. Even though we've been growing, Nigeria, like most in Africa, faces a large infrastructure deficit. The inadequate infrastructure is holding back economic growth by at least 2 percentage points per annum, according to a recent World Bank study. And we need about $14.2 billion per year to bridge the infrastructure gap, with $10.5 billion needed for federal infrastructure alone. And currently, we're spending about $6 billion. Absence of adequate infrastructure in Nigeria, particularly poor electricity supply, adds a massive 16% to business costs in the country, compared to 2% in South Africa, 5% in China, and 10% in India. For a country of our size, we are underinvested in transportation infrastructure, particularly roads and rail, and we currently face a housing deficit of 17 million units. Without a doubt, the death of infrastructure is further exacerbated by the lack of access to long-term finance, which makes investment in long-term projects very difficult. Second, in terms of our revenues, we still remain highly dependent on oil for 70% of our revenues. And that is why, given what we now know is a diversified economy, an absolute push to increase non-oil revenues is important and essential, and we are doing it, as I'll comment later on. Third, a big problem, inequality. Even though we have been growing at a fast rate, it's growth that has come without the high quality that we would like. That is signified by the fact of the rising inequality in the country. The Gini coefficient, which measures the extent of inequality in a country, where 100 implies perfect inequality. For Nigeria, we've risen from about 32 a decade ago to 48 now, 48.8. Just for comparison, you'll see that in China, it's about 42. In the OECD countries, it's about 31, 32. South Africa is 63. Brazil is 55, and so on. So whilst Nigeria is not, by any measure the worst, still the trend is in the wrong direction. And we know that a country that continues to grow with inequality will have very serious problems to solve if moves are not made to correct this. So certainly this inequality and lack of inclusion is one of the most serious problems that the country faces, and recognized to be so. As Nigerians will always say, when you talk about this GDP growth, they always say that GDP will go chop. And is the meaning now, is it GDP we are going to eat? It's not creating enough jobs. But the point is that without the growth, the country would be even worse off. Please remember that in the 80s, the country stagnated. And in the 90s, it grew at about certainly 2% or less, which was less than the rate of population growth. So we need the growth, but we need the growth to be better quality. Our human development indicators are also wanting. We have problems with out-of-school children, particularly in the north of our country and the northeast. We have problems with indicators like high maternal mortality and infant mortality. And our governance and corruption continues to be a challenge, and it's probably the most talked about challenge in the country. We have issues not only with governance issues and corruption issues within the country, but we also have to contend with issues like transfer pricing, international tax evasion, over-invoicing, and so on, of companies that are also working within the country. And therefore, both inside and outside, with respect to companies operating, domestic companies and companies outside, and with respect to our own economy, there are significant governance challenges and corruption challenges which we must not run away from, including the corrupt theft of our oil that we have to deal with. We also have our security challenge in the form of Boko Haram, which has been ravaging the northeast of our country and which recently wrought a very tragic act on our country with the spiriting away of our girls from Chibok. And I know that this is a very sore point here. I just want you all to know that by no means has the government given up on these girls. There's no one day that we wake up or the president wakes up that the issue of these girls is not at the forefront of his thinking. I do not believe that there's anyone who has a child or a daughter who can even imagine what it feels like to have your daughter lost. So the government is in a delicate position. You know, we are dealing with unpredictable people. This has to be handled very carefully, and the government is handling it. One piece of very good news I had is that a delegation from Chibok came to my office last week, Wednesday, on our National Day, to say that there's relative peace in their community and that, in fact, contrary to the signals they'd given before, they want us to come and start work to bring the children back into school, that for the past 2 months, there have been increased security presence in their community. They would like their children to get back to school. They would like us to start work on that school from which the girls were taken, the Chibok Girls Secondary School. They do not want their children, their daughters, to come back and find the situation that they found before. So I wanted to just use this occasion to thank all of you who have felt with us on this issue and to say that on the security side, very strong moves that are positive are being made. We need to know that this problem of the terror, of course, you know that it's not just Nigeria that is going through it, but it's something of a global phenomenon. But nevertheless, we're taking our own measures to try and put our country, particularly the northeast part of the country, less than 1% of the territory, back into order. The absence of appropriate institutions that will translate policies into practical solutions is also one of the things that we confront as a challenge. And I strongly believe many times when I look at the progress of development, that the difference between the developed and the developing countries is not so much that people in the developed countries are somehow holier or better, but because they have the right institutions in place, and because there's less impunity, the temptation for corruption and so on to take root or do serious damage is much less. If we want to make progress in our country, one of the things we must do is build strong institutions to close the gap. So against this backdrop of challenges that we have, what is the way forward? I want to tell you that I've dwelt on these challenges again for a long time so that people understand that when we talk of the progress that is being made, we are not running away. You must know what progress against what challenges. The way forward. The way forward is one that is exciting, one that we have been moving on with the president of the country who has introduced a transformation agenda. And what is this? The first thing, like I said, is to try and improve security in those parts of the country like the Northeast, where security is a problem because development has to take place in a secure environment. And I've already touched on that and told you what is happening in that small part of the country where this is taking place. But on the other areas, I want you to know that on the issue of infrastructure, the government has developed a 30-year Nigeria Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan for accelerating infrastructure development in the country. The master plan is aimed at raising our stock of infrastructure from the current 35 to 40% of GDP to 70% by 2043. In the power sector, we embarked on one of the most exciting but challenging privatization programs that any country has witnessed. And it took us a decade to do it because, of course, it's not easy to privatize an entire sector against the action of vested interests. But we have done it. We've sold off all our power assets except the transmission companies. And we've successfully done that in a very transparent manner to well-known international companies. And we've liberalized the sector where companies like GE have come in and pledged to invest more than about 10 billion over the next decade. They've actually started with investments of about $1 billion. And it's against this backdrop that the Power Africa initiative of the US, of President Obama, is taking place. I want to share with you that the institutions in the power sector, I think we got it right. We put the regulatory framework in place. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Authority is in place and has a strong regulator. I'm harping on this because sometimes we've done privatizations without having the necessary regulatory framework, and that has yielded less success. But in this case, we put the cart before the horse. We put the horse before the cart. Thank you. In this case, we put the horse before the cart, and we got it right. We put the regulatory framework in place, we privatize, we liberalize the sector, and we now have new private investments that are coming in. For example, the Azura Edo IPP, which has signed a power purchase agreement for about $1 billion in investment, 700 for power, 300 for gas, and so on. There are many more of these kinds of investments which involve very exciting number of investors, international investors in our power sector. We know that it will take us, we still have constraints on gas supply and on tariff setting, but we are working on this full time. The Ministry of Petroleum Resources has put in place an emergency gas master plan that will drive and close the gap with regards to the needs for gas. So we are working on it. We expect that within the next 1 to 2 years, because we need a transition period, we should be in a position for people to begin to talk about the power sector the way that they talk about the telecommunications sector now. Even on roads, we have moved. We have about 32 road rehabilitation and construction projects ongoing now, completed, and several ongoing. These efforts have reduced travel times between some of our origin and destinations of our routes. For example, the journey from Benin to Lagos, which used to take upwards of 9 hours in 2011, now takes between 3 to 4 hours, just to illustrate. I see someone doing, can you attest to that? Very good. The rail lines are beginning to be restored after decades of neglect, and we now have the Lagos to Kano completed and functional. The eastern line from Port Harcourt to Maiduguri is nearing completion. Over 25 locomotives have been procured from GE for these lines. We're improving, and even the Abuja-Kaduna 2-gauge, standard gauge line is almost complete. We're also putting in place light rail in Abuja, and I hope that many of you will have the benefit of this in the near future. Our aviation infrastructure is improving. It has not been in good condition, but we are constructing 5 new international terminals at Lagos, Kano, Abuja, Enugu, and Port Harcourt. The airport is one of the few things you see as soon as you come in, and we accept that these are not in the condition they should be. So rather than tinker, we decided to build new terminals financed by Chinese concessional lending, and we hope that these will be very ready in the very near future. I just want to say that diversification is a very important objective of the Jonathan administration. And there are 2 revolutions that I want to talk to you about. The 2 have to do with agriculture and housing. In agricultural sector, I think many people have become aware of the agriculture is a business revolution that is being driven by a very able Minister of Agriculture, in which the drive is to change the mindset about the way you view the sector. The World Bank study shows that agriculture is 3 times more effective in solving poverty than any other sector, and is the sector that is most likely to create jobs for us and for our young people, but not agriculture done in the old way. The new way of looking at it throughout the value chain, using it to create modern jobs, processing our product, taking it all the way from research to production to processing to marketing, and making it into a sector that can be attractive for young people. That's the way we are going. And the proof that this is going well is that we are drawing investment from very high-value companies like Cargill, that is investing in our cassava for starch. Unilever, also investing in cassava for sorbitol. Unilever is just putting 150 million euros, and Paul Paulson was just in Nigeria to launch that. We have a national, so that's a revolution in agriculture, and linked to that, because agro-processing is a very good base for us, is a national industrial revolution plan, with a focus on entire value chains of several subsectors. As I mentioned, agro-processing, but we also have petrochemicals, automobiles, textiles, and cement. Nigeria is now a net exporter of cement and has expanded cement output from 2 million metric tons in 2002 to 28.5 million metric tons in 2013. We even have excess capacity that we can export. I know that might not say anything to many people, but if you were old enough to remember the cement ships of the 70s, I was in my teens then, carrying, and some of them carrying sand, and the image they gave to the country, the fact that we no longer have to do that and can actually export is something very promising. We are getting investment in fertilizer, $1.2 billion fertilizer investment from Indorama with a plant at One. Procter & Gamble, of course, $250 million in consumer goods. SAB Miller, $100 million brewery in Onitsha. And I could go on and on. So this link between our natural resource base and processing and manufacturing is very important. The second revolution I want to talk about is in the housing sector. Housing is a non-tradable sector and therefore is not really paid attention to, has not been attended to in African countries as a means of solving so many problems. Social problems because everybody wants a house, a roof over their heads. Economic problems because it adds to GDP and creates, and job creation because it creates thousands of jobs for plumbers, carpenters, architects, quantity surveyors. Somehow, we've not been able to use this. And from my vantage point in the World Bank, I was asking myself, why haven't we done this in so many countries? Why is it that in the US, housing stats are monitored almost like a religion? In the UK, there are all sorts of efforts made, to get people to buy housing and own their own housing in both of these countries, because people realize that even when you own a house, it gives you a stake in your country. It makes you feel like a citizen. It gives you something to fight for. It solves those social problems. It gives you an asset. You become someone who can be an economic operator. In so many ways, the housing sector is so vital, and we've not tapped it. But now, we're doing that. We've launched another revolution. President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan launched it in January 2014 to create an institution called the Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Company, a publicly sponsored private sector institution that is designed to provide liquidity into the mortgage industry so that we can create more mortgages and mortgages, asset-backed securities that can be purchased. We are doing it carefully. We learned the lessons from what happened here and elsewhere in the housing sector. So we don't allow too much optimism and over-enthusiasm. And also, we don't allow products that no one can understand. So with all those caveats, I think that this is a sector that we are working on, and I'm very excited about it. Because, no less a company than Cantor Fitzgerald has been in touch with us to say, we like what you're doing. We didn't call them, they called us. I don't know if they're in the audience. They said, we like what you are doing, and we want to work with you on the value chain for housing because we think you're onto something very, very important. The land titling that the Thomson Reuters president of taxation spoke about, we've given states, participating states, criteria they must meet, which is that land titling, giving title to land must be done not in years and months, but in weeks. Foreclosure laws that did not, previously banks could not foreclose, all these are being reformed to lay the groundwork for us to really have this revolution. I end by saying that we advertised for the first 10,000 mortgages. We got 66,000 applications on the website, and we are processing them all. And we'll go on from there. Our objective is to get to about 200,000 affordable mortgages per year, and I know that we're well on our way to doing it. So those are two that I want to share with you on technology. I'll just make one or two more points. On the information technology, we realize that this is a wave for the future, and Nigeria is not being left out. The fact that we have 125 mobile phones today, from a position where we had only 450 landlines in 2000, offers us a whole array of prospects which we are trying to exploit. With that, we've been able to craft an e-wallet in agriculture so that farmers can get vouchers by phone and collect their fertilizer Before, with the old system that was mad in corruption, 11% of farmers used to get their inputs. Now we are up to 90% in the sample for population of 5 million that have been registered. We are using it to transfer messages on health. Even with this Ebola, the mobile telephone network helped us. All of us got messages on what to look out for, how to wash our hands, what to do in order to manage this. And our youth are on social media and on the internet. I think 33% of the youth have access. We have e-commerce now, is a reality. We've also established 500 kilometers of fiber optic cables for broadband internet so that we can offer more government services, get more of our rural areas in. So we are firmly in the knowledge economy. We have a long way to go to complete the infrastructure we need to do it. But what I'm trying to tell you is that we've embarked on a journey. And finally, what about institutions? I told you that the difference between developed and developing countries is the absence of institutions. And in Nigeria, important and bigger economy as it is, there's still so many gaps in institutions. I just mentioned to you one. Can you imagine that a country of that size did not have a viable mortgage system? When you look at it, you think about it, it's astounding, isn't it? So we've just created one. Can you imagine that Nigeria does not have a source of longer-term finance? That if you're a manufacturer, an SME, you can only borrow for 2 or 3 years if you're lucky, at very high interest rates. Because an institution to offer term finance does not exist. We are creating it. The Nigerian Development Bank is about to be, the DBN, Development Bank of Nigeria, is about to be born. Just like the Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Corporation was created, we are creating this to ensure that our SMEs, our middle-level manufacturers, have access to 5 to 10 years of loans so that they can invest in the long term and so we can avoid the mismatch of maturities we see amongst our private sector. That is an institution that is being created. In addition, processes are being put in place. Our finances, we are putting things on an electronic platform. We have a government integrated financial management system that links Treasury to the budget office and helps us avoid transferring cash from one department to the other. An integrated personnel and payroll management system so that biometrically we register all workers and pay them directly, which is not what we were doing before. And that had led to things like ghost workers and ghost pensioners. You know, we had a system where you would have a ghost worker who would graduate to a ghost pensioner, you know? And now, with this system, we've weeded out 53,000 ghost workers, and we saved about $800 million. We are putting in a Treasury single account system, you know, where that will give me the ability to see all our finances at once. And finally, on the institution side, we have now a biometric ID card. We've only printed 3,000, but guess what? It also has a chip in it because we are in a partnership with MasterCard. With this, we'll be able to bring people left out into the financial system. We can transfer pensions. We can make conditional cash transfers, government payments. We can identify people to be able to help them with social safety net programs. That is another very, very important revolution that is taking place. Ladies and gentlemen, you can see that I could go on and on and on, but I have to stop. I just wanted to tease you by sharing with you a few of these delights, of these delicacies that we're trying to put in place in Nigeria. We are not there yet, but I want to assure you that we've embarked on a very important journey and that no matter what happens, there is no turning back. You might see a step sideways, you might even see a step back, but the trend is onward. Why? Because Nigerians will not go for anything less. Civil society is alive. And civil society can be very critical. But it's okay. Without that kind of criticism, government cannot perform better. Provided it's constructive criticism, it is very welcome. And I know that they are going to keep the government looking at accountability all the way down the line. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have an emerging Nigerian society that you need to watch. As I always say, I love to end my talks by telling people, and I'll not be tired of saying it, if you're not in Nigeria, you're not in Africa. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you for that speech. It's obviously. You've sketched out, hello everyone, I'm Leslie Rawton, a correspondent for Reuters. Ngozi and I have known each other for many years since you were negotiating the Paris debt in Nigeria as the finance minister, then you went on to foreign minister, and then I knew you at the World Bank. And it's kind of a sweet reunion we're having in a way, because in 2008, you and I had long discussions about land reform, and it came out of mainly the issue of food price spikes. But it also showed how precious land is in Africa. And I want to knuckle down, because you've talked about a Nigerian transformation, but still a lot of the building blocks are, have to be put in place for it to reach that next stage. How important is land reform in that? I mean, you've obviously sketched it as a priority, but how important is it to get Nigeria to that next stage?
Well, Leslie, I think it's critically important, because all those who have read Hernando Soto's work, know that this is one asset, that has not been made into the economic asset it should be. So for every country, you really need to look at how best to actualize that thing of transferring land into an asset that can work for the people, especially people at the bottom end of the ladder. So, we have states. Remember that Nigeria is a country with 36 states. And the issue about land is vested mostly in the states. And I think that state after state, you just heard about Cross River State and what is happening there. States are beginning to realize that if they want to transform their own economies, they have to reform and they have to take action. In addition to that, the president set up a long-standing presidential land reform committee that is also looking overall at the country, at how we manage this. It's a very important and delicate issue, because you've got cultural customs that govern land, and land use. And how you now come in with a modern system on top of that is something that needs to be carefully managed. But there's absolutely no doubt that whether it's for housing or for agriculture, if we're going to treat agriculture as a business, we have to move on the land issue.
But if people don't feel that they own their land, are they going to be as productive as you would expect them to? I mean, they won't have a vested interest in that land. So you've now moved on to the next step of giving those people that land and trying to sort it out. I was very struck by the FT editorial that you wrote recently, that, you need customs, rules, and procedures to hold leaders accountable, enable markets to function. However, building systems and processes tends to be long, arduous, and unglamorous. It does not produce the headlines and the politicians that politicians crave. How long is it? I mean, can you give us some kind of idea on how long that process how far you are into that process of getting people, registered for land and giving them that confidence?
Leslie, it's not, if it were an easy process, it would have been done long ago. So it's going to take time. But I believe we need to take it piece by piece. And that is linking it to assets and to development that people can see quickly. If you show states, as we've done with state governors, that, look, we want to work with you on the housing sector, but in order for you to participate, we give them an incentive for us to come and bring mortgage institutions that will give mortgages and have them repurchased by this mortgage. You have to do certain things. They all want to participate. Housing is a very tangible thing that a state governor can show his people, a politician, that, look, we provided housing. So that the incentive to do that and to transform the play and to put in modern land registries, and so it's there. So I believe that just doing overall land reform that people cannot link to tangible things will not work. We have to say, okay, for housing, we want to do this. For agriculture, this is the reason we need to do. And that's the path we're beginning to tread. Some states are far ahead. The Federal Capital Territory, you can go and get your certificate of registration within 3 to 4 weeks. Cross River State, Lagos State, all of them. So even without an overall massive program, states are realizing. It will take time. Not all states are the same place we are. And obviously, some, because Nigeria is a very diversified country with different customs, some it will be more difficult because there are people renting land. And getting those states to look at this system and find a way to transform it is not going to be easy. But the move is on.
The move is on. And that's definitely what we're hearing from you. When it comes to investors, foreign investors, how important is it for them to have the certainty that when they're investing, when they're buying a business, when they're buying the land to develop, that they have those guarantees that it's not going to be taken away from them?
I think you should ask the foreign investors who have invested, and maybe there are one or two of them in the audience. Mr. Komantaros is there. He's been in Nigeria for a long time, and he can tell you. It's better than me talking.
We've never had issues getting land.
How important, right? But how important is it that he feels secure with that, and and that the steps are in place, that he doesn't, it just adds a layer of confidence.
Yeah, no, I think that pretty much sometimes acquiring the land is not easy, and there may be issues. So let's not lie about that. And the registration process is one of those that were not rated very highly in the Doing Business report, which is why it's vital we reform it. But I believe there's rule of law. Once you have been able to get the land and acquire the certificate, it's very unusual. It's when you don't have any certificate, then people can sell the land they've sold to you again and again. And it does happen. I can see many nodding in the audience. But when you transform it and you're able to get that land, I think there's pretty much certainty that no one will come and take it away.
And you also, in this editorial, spoke about technology providing the opportunity to open that way. Can you tell us a little bit why you thought it was important specifically to highlight the role of technology in that, and especially given that many of the land agencies in many countries, in Africa and everywhere else, are pretty corrupt? Is your feeling that through technology and transparency that will instill confidence?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think not just on land, but overall, I think technology changes the ball game considerably. And we have to go with it because that's what our young people are doing. Nigerian youth are in hubs developing apps. You know, people have developed apps on the budget and how you can use it to understand the budget faster and quicker and hold the government more accountable. Electronic systems, I really believe in them, yes, because I think they cut out or cut down on the corruption. They are not perfect, but at least they take us to a level beyond where we are now. So I do believe that part of the institution building and the systems and processes we have to focus on should be around technology. How to use it to deliver government services and delink people from service. If we can put all our customs on an electronic platform, okay, then that stops the interaction between customs officer and people and reduces the amount of the temptation to ask for something. If you can do passports, which we've not done, electronically. Now, most Nigerians don't complain about passports anymore. The ambassador is here. They just go on the website. Am I right? They complain about visas. I'm not talking about visas for people. Before, it used to take us so long to even get a passport. Now you barely hear a complaint. So I think those are the types of things. Rendering better service to our population must depend on harnessing the technology and solving the problem of poverty. I really think technology has a very important role to play. We cannot target people properly who are the poor. Many people don't have an identity in the Western sense. Thank God we have an identity in the cultural sense. And in fact, in Nigeria, that identity is so strong, you can't get away from it. But for modern systems, you know, if the government wants to target to send money, you know, we don't have any means because people don't have ID cards. And now we're introducing them. I don't know where my purse is. I would have shown you my own. I'm very proud of it. With MasterCard at the back.
Because, exactly, it gives you, you feel like you belong, don't you, when you can show it. And that's what most ordinary people, whether they're literate or not, will feel.
Yeah.
But tell us about, I mean, Nigeria's come this far, and to put in those building blocks is time consuming as well. I mean, how quickly do you need to move on this? And I mean, how do you, people want to see their dividends immediately.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how you've managed to kind of, to help people understand that.
Well, it's not easy. I mean, I'm sure if you poll Nigerians, they will tell you the government is doing nothing, it's not very productive and effective, and so on and so forth. Some. But many will also acknowledge that progress is being made. Why is that? Some of the things that need to be done take time. I said it. I said it in my article. Building institutions takes time. It took time in this country to put in a legal system that works and a judiciary that functions well. It took in time to build all the regulatory framework for the private sector. And even now, you still see breaches of that. So it will take time. We need the leadership that, focuses like a laser beam on what needs to be done. And I believe the president is doing that. Many times, he just focuses on, let us deliver what needs to be delivered. And later on, the same people who are not satisfied, if we can show them some results, they'll begin to change their mind. So I must say he's very focused on results, and that's where what has really been guiding. And it's very exciting. Yes. When you do achieve one result and you see the impact it can make and how it can really change. And believe me, the day we got this 66,000 applications for the housing, it was a day of joy because it meant people were believing that we are going to deliver this, and we are going to deliver it. And they're believing that this country is going to transform, and the young will have hope. So when you see those results rolling in, it makes up for all the difficulty and the very difficult balancing act, the non-sexiness of doing some of those things. When you talk of government integrated financial system, eyes glaze over. What is that? Nobody gets excited about that. But simply put, if you don't put in that electronic system, we will continue to transfer cash from Treasury to one department to the other. With what consequence? People can siphon the cash. They can add in as many workers as they like to pay, and you won't know. That's what we call the ghost workers. But when you now begin to see it and you begin to actually register a department, and then you find that, look, they told us they had 30,000 workers, and 20 are the only ones who came forward to do their biometrics. So we've saved 10,000 that we used to pay. That's exciting, with all due respect.
How easy is it to cut out corruption as you're doing this?
No, it's not easy, Leslie. I think if it were easy, every country would have done it. It's very difficult, but that doesn't mean, for me, the issue is not whether you have problems, like I always say. And I read out a whole list of our challenges. But if you flip it around, that's an opportunity to correct something. So for me, corruption, we shouldn't talk about it in broad terms. In order to have an impact, we need to nail it, and specifically, and then try one by one to see what can be done. So the fact we've weeded out these ghost workers and will continue to do so is one form of corruption dealt with. The fact that we had, the oil subsidy fraud, and we were able to, using Ernst & Young and other auditors, audit $6.7 billion worth of oil subsidy that marketers had claimed, and we found $1.5 billion worth of fraud, and the people are being taken, and prosecuted. That is something to note. Is it the declaration of victory? No, but it's one thing. The fact that we're doing a forensic audit being carried out by Pricewaterhouse on allegations of missing money from the oil company, and we are waiting to get it momentarily, that's another action. So you have to attack all these things to show people that you will not sit by. But what I also say is that on the issue of corruption, it starts with the individual. It starts with you. There's no country in which the government alone is expected to fight. They are to show the example. The policymakers must do that. But it also starts with the individual saying, I will not do it. I will not participate. And if, you know, and we take it from there.
I was wondering how much you think land reform would contribute to the economic gains. It doesn't only, by opening up your registries, opening up the system generally, and making it move quicker, what are the benefits? What are the economic benefits?
Okay, well, land reform, you know, because you're from South Africa, and land is very emotive there. Yes, it's an issue in Nigeria, but it's not the same kind of issue. We don't have, you know, just as many instances of people owning huge portions of land and others being totally dispossessed. So it is an economic issue in that we are not monetizing that asset. And I believe whilst we should not overplay it, I believe that the attempt to have a proper land registry will do one or two things. It will give smallholders, you know, and small farmers and others within the economy an asset that they can take to the bank, literally, and say, okay, you know, I can get a loan because I've got the papers and title to this. That is not happening now, except in very few cases. That will cause an enormous economic revolution. But there's also a fear, which is why in Nigeria there's a bit of hesitation. Once you monetize that and you give people that title, the danger that they will also be tempted to sell the land and then suddenly find themselves without a livelihood is also what is frightening. Then what do they go? Where do they go? Right now, without that system, people are still on land with traditional understandings that you've been farming this piece of land in your family for the past 50 or 60 years. You know, I remember when my mother-in-law passed away, she called my husband and said to him, this is the land that your grandmother gave me. We've been farming it for 50 years. This is that. And actually pointed out to him 3 or 4 plots that he didn't know about. Nobody, even though she didn't have title, no one has come to take the land away. Because we have that thing that once you've been farming on it, somehow, you know, it belongs to you. Now, if we give the title, there's also that danger. So let's have a balancing act. I think that's why there's sometimes a hesitation. But we're in the modern world, and you're absolutely right. We will make faster progress if some of these things could be turned into an economic asset.
Right. Talking about an economic asset, and I was really interested, I think last time I saw you, a potential investor walked up to you and said, Minister, here's my card, I want to build homes in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. And there's a huge market for that. I was very struck by the fact that the majority of Nigerians do not have the ability for home ownership, mm-hmm. and there's a deficit of 17 million units. Mm-hmm. I mean, is that not an incredible, first of all, an investment opportunity for many, but also gains for, you know, people and the government?
No, that's what I said in my speech. That's why I called it one of the revolutions that we are going through, Leslie, because it's an enormous opportunity. An enormous investment opportunity, and we're welcoming all those who want to come and build housing. It's also an enormous social opportunity, an opportunity to give young people hope. Being in a country where you cannot own your own home until you've worked for 30 years or 25 years doesn't engender much ownership in that country and that government. Mm. It doesn't. No. I mean, you must ask yourself sometimes, why do these two countries, one of them UK and the other US, why do they fight so much about home ownership? It's because when you sit back, it solves so many things. It gives you a stake in that society. It puts a roof over the head. It gives you an asset. It does so many things. It makes you feel like you've achieved and accomplished something. And if you have to wait 30 years when you are retiring to be able to do it, it just takes away from that. Right. If you can do it when you're young and you have hope that you can have a roof over your head for it's a common wish that anyone would have. So housing is an enormous, it solves problems, you know, in so many ways. Mm. But again, like I said, we have to move with caution. let's not get carried away and create the type of market that will lead to the economy, having some severe problems down the line. So I hope we've opened our eyes and learned a few lessons. And hopefully we won't
Peter
do that.
has said we need to move on because the ambassador needs to go. I want to open this also up to for questions. If anybody has some thinking about where Nigeria is going, anything you want to give the minister on that. And can you identify yourself too, please?
Thank you very much. Excellency, my name is Nia Kwete. I was born in Ghana, but I've lived here for several decades. I actually worked in Nigeria to start the OSIWA, the George Soros Foundation. I have a two-part question. I'm glad that you talked about Ebola and giving your background with the bank. In my school days, we battled the bank about structural adjustment and the fact that they wouldn't allow investment in education and in healthcare. Now people only talk about the civil war having devastated the healthcare systems, but they don't talk about the mistakes of the bank and the fund in not allowing those kinds of investments. So if you can comment on that. Also on the title of your talk, I saw democracy and good governance. Some friends and I have been having a debate. I wonder what you see the difference between the two. What's the difference between democracy and good governance? Thank you.
Okay. It's a very interesting question, the issue of Ebola about building systems, how people have focused on specific diseases for so long, but have pretty much neglected the system.
Yeah, on the issue of the health systems, I know that there's a certain, thank you, those are two very good questions, and people always talk about the structural adjustment. So it's not that one wants to get away from it. Actually, somebody wrote something the other day and said, I wrote my book, and I neglected to talk about structural adjustment. And I said the book was about the reforms that took place within a certain period. So we also have to move on. And I don't think it's to deny. I think the World Bank and the fund can speak for themselves. I think they've accepted that they made mistakes. In those days, they've acknowledged it. It's in so many bank publications. And they've said, yes, we made mistakes, and we've learned from them. Some of the things that happened then should not have happened in terms of depleting the health and education systems, or even focusing on primary education to the exclusion of secondary. They've admitted that. And I think actually when I worked at the bank, one of the things that I thought was attractive about that institution was the fact that it admits mistakes, that it has an independent evaluation department, OED, whose job it is to look at what the bank has done and say, did it mess up or not? And it said it did. Now, what do you learn from it? So I think we too as Africans, yes, mistakes were made, but we now have to move on and say, have they changed from that time? What are they doing differently? And if not, what message should we send to them? I think that's where we need to be. But, it's almost as if sometimes you don't knock them on the head for structural adjustment. When you're giving a talk, you can't move on. I'm not in that category. We have to move on. But they did make mistakes. Second, the second question was around
democracy
and good governance. I think the two are not exactly synonymous with each other. It is sure that democracy provides a better environment for good governance in the sense that it offers more transparency, more accountability, more voice. You can only have good governance where people can stand up and say you're not doing things right. Whether they are right or wrong, I always insist that civil society should have the right to say what it wants to say, because that's the essence of democracy. You must have an opposition party or parties, otherwise you're not a democracy. So that gives you a chance, but it's not always that it results in good governance. You can also have democracies that are not necessarily producing the best good governance. And you can have dictatorships that produce a good amount of good governance, like Singapore did under Lee Kuan Yew and transformed the country. There are many benign dictatorships that we see now, people may not have as much voice, but I guess their living conditions are good. And I think you can carry on to a point where you now need to open up a bit more.
This is your opportunity to ask the
I
minister.
actually have to go to the Commonwealth
What
Finance
time?
Ministers meeting. I have to leave in like 5 minutes.
Can we have 2 more questions? Sure. Let's get this lady.
Thank you. I'm Ulubanke King Akerele, former Minister of Commerce and Industry of Liberia and former Minister of Foreign Affairs. I want to say that I'm so proud to have heard you, Ngozi.
Thank you.
I also want to confirm that the government of Nigeria made available $500,000 to Liberia on Ebola, and it was the first country that did it. It was very important. We express appreciation for that. We also expressed our regrets. Our president has already said so about the way Ebola got to Nigeria. In fact, it was one of my family in Nigeria, Dr. Adedevo, who was one of those who died from it. My own doctor, my private doctor in Liberia, also died from this. So we want to express our appreciation. We feel so proud of what Nigeria has done. 2 issues on some of the things you talked about, because those were part of my domain and my portfolio as Minister of Commerce and Industry. I respect very much what you've said. A couple of pointers. One,
I'm sorry, man, can you hurry up? Because the minister needs to go too.
Please.
I'm asking you.
This is very important.
Okay. It is.
Nigeria's entree into the agriculture as a business, I want to urge you to please look at the possibility of extending some of what you are doing within the context of the Mano River Union and the regional integration. The West African Power Pool is on course, but at the same time, the cement production that is starting, we need that within the general area of the Mano River Union countries. And I think with your moving in the agriculture as a business, I think you can help us, very much needed, once we get over the Ebola. Second, final aspect is in terms of your plans, in terms of the development bank. We are very interested in what you're doing. I believe I read somewhere last year, December, when I was in Nigeria, that you were linking up with a bank from Brazil.
Yes, BNDES.
I would like more information. I've been trying to find out about it because I'm doing a paper on tapping the experiences of other African countries in terms of trying to move forward in Liberia. So please, I'd really like information. If you could say something about what you're going to be doing with the Bank of Brazil in your effort to move forward. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, my sister, and thank you. We are very much at one with you. As I said in my opinion piece today, we really feel for the 3 countries, and we feel we must come together quickly to try and do even more than what we've done. I just want to comment quickly on the Development Bank. We just decided to learn from some other institutions. So we looked around, and some of the examples that people talked about were the KfW in Germany, which has long been a development bank that has done a lot for SMEs within Germany and outside. BNDES of Brazil, which has turned into a huge juggernaut for investment within the country. And the other one was the Development Bank of South Africa, so DBSA. So we sent teams to study what those development institutions are doing and to learn from them. And from Brazil, we learned a whole lot. I mean, we can maybe send you something later since we're out of time. But it provides a good example of using an institution to drive manufacturing and other sectors of the economy. Again, it's not perfect. So we also try to learn the bad lessons and to stay away from that and take what is good from each side.
Peter, how much time do we have? One more question, please. I'll have that gentleman at the back.
Thank you. Your Excellency, I am very proud to be here today and to listen to you. As a Nigerian who has also been out here for so many decades, but recently I've been reconnected with Nigeria and doing some things that I could do. You have been, this is not a question. I just want to talk about the fact that people have talked so much about you as one of the individuals that has been in the forefront of tapping Nigerians in diaspora and encouraging them to be part of this whole exciting development that is going on. And I want to ask you if there is a structured process or clearly defined way that you are going about in continuing to encourage those diasporans to be part of the whole process. Let me just track back for a second. I know I didn't introduce myself. I'm Jeff Ebinama, and I work with a boutique consulting firm in the DC area here. We've done a lot of work in Nigeria in workforce development in different states and on the federal level. And what is going on there is exciting. Recently, I was at the formal launching of the Global Learning Institute, which you were there and said some remarkable words. And the gentleman running the organization, Professor Mani, happens to be a colleague here before he came to Nigeria.
Sorry, Jeff,
so
what is
thank
your
you.
question, please?
The question is, do you have is there a way that the diasporans can have access to not just learning more, but also being part of the whole excitement in Nigeria?
Yes, thank you very much. We actually, within the Secretary to the Cabinet's office, have a unit, that looks after the affairs of diasporans. But diasporans have also organized themselves in the NIDO, the Nigerians in Diaspora. And through that mechanism, they'll bring concerns. For example, they've said they want to vote. How are we going to make sure that diasporans vote? They want certain things to be done. The doctors have come forward to say they'd like to participate in delivering medical care. We have 25,000 Nigerian doctors here. Yeah, and okay, His Excellency the Ambassador is here, and he says he has an office in the embassy. So I want to thank you for your interest and what you've expressed, and encourage you to please reach out to the office in the Nigerian embassy and to the ambassador who is here, and then we can try to see. But I just want to say, as I say to all diasporans, it's not easy. Don't expect that everything will be laid out for you. Because when you come, there are people who are also going to say, well, I've been here sweating it out. And then, they said it with me, who does she think she is? To come here and come and say she wants to know, she knows finances and she can run this. So don't expect everything to be laid out for you. You also have to come in. And there's no perfect time. Things will not be perfect. If we waited for things to be perfect to go home, it won't happen. You just have to make a determination that this is my home. No one is going to solve our problems for us but ourselves. No one. We are living in countries that other people have made good. I'm not trying to say we shouldn't, but if you can contribute whatever quota and change even the life of one person, please do so. And don't wait for perfection, just come.
So that's your message. Thank you very much for your time. Sorry, we've got to cut it short. You've got lots on your hands this week with the IMF. We look forward to keep following the story.
Thank you so much, Leslie.